The morning fog still clung to the streets of Billings, Montana, when Margaret Hayes pushed through the glass door of the Silver Spur Diner at 5:30. At 62, she'd been opening this place 6 days a week for the past 18 years. Her hands knew the rhythm: flip the sign, start the coffee, check the grill temperature, arrange the counter stools. The neon sign buzzed to life outside, casting a pale blue glow across the empty parking lot. By 6, the truckers started filtering in. Margaret knew most by name. She poured coffee without asking, remembered who took cream, who wanted their eggs over easy. The diner smelled like bacon grease and fresh bread, sounds of sizzling filling the air alongside classic country from the jukebox. Around 7:15, the bell above the door chimed. A boy walked in alone, maybe 9 years old, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big and sneakers held together with duct tape. He slid into a corner booth, hands folded on the table, eyes fixed on the laminated menu. Margaret approached with her notepad. "Morning, sweetheart. You waiting on someone?" The boy shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just looking." She noticed how thin his wrists were, how his gaze lingered on the pictures of pancakes and eggs. "You hungry?" He glanced toward the door, then back at the menu. "I don't have money right now. My mom said she'd meet me here later." Margaret had seen enough hungry kids in her life to recognize the signs. She tucked her notepad into her apron. "Tell you what, breakfast rush just ended and we've got extra pancakes that'll just go to waste. How about I bring you a stack? On the house." His eyes widened. "Really? Really? You like bacon?" He nodded quickly. 10 minutes later, she set down a full plate, 3 pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, and a glass of orange juice. The boy ate slowly at first, then with increasing urgency, like he hadn't seen a meal in days. Margaret refilled his juice twice, brought extra syrup without being asked. She was clearing the nearby tables when Raymond Chen, the owner, emerged from his office. He was a thin man in his 50s, who'd bought the diner 3 years ago, always watching the registers, always counting costs. "Margaret." His voice was sharp. "What's that?" She turned. "Breakfast. Did he pay?" "Ray, the kid's hungry. I'm covering it from my—" "You're not covering anything." He strode to the booth, standing over the boy. "You need to pay or leave." The boy's fork froze midway to his mouth. Margaret stepped between them. "Ray, come on, it's just one meal. It's policy, we're not a charity." He pointed at the door. "Kid, out." Margaret felt heat rise in her chest. "He's a child, and you're an employee who just gave away product without authorization." Raymond's jaw tightened. "This is the 3rd time this month I've caught you doing this. We've talked about this. We throw away more food every night than—" "That's not the point. The point is you don't make those decisions." He pulled off his glasses, cleaning them with deliberate slowness. "You're done, Margaret. Clock out." The diner went silent. 3 truckers at the counter had stopped eating. A couple in a booth stared. "You're firing me? For feeding a hungry kid?" "I'm firing you for repeated policy violations and insubordination." He gestured toward the back. "Get your things." Margaret's hands trembled as she untied her apron. She looked at the boy whose face had gone pale with guilt. She smiled at him gently. "You finish your breakfast, honey. Don't you worry about anything." She walked to the back room, gathered her purse and the small plant from her locker. When she returned, the boy was gone. The plate clean, a folded napkin left behind. The truckers watched her leave in silence. Outside, the October wind cut through her thin cardigan. She sat in her 15-year-old sedan for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. 18 years, gone in 10 minutes. Chapter 2. Word spreads. By noon, the story had traveled through Billings like wildfire. One of the truckers who'd witnessed Margaret's firing was a retired biker named Jack Wrench Morrison. He'd stopped at the Silver Spur on his way to a Veterans of Foreign Wars meeting. By the time he reached the VFW hall, he'd already made 3 phone calls. "You believe this?" Wrench stood at the bar, his weathered face set in disgust. "Fired her right there in front of everyone." Kid couldn't have been older than 10. Tom Rattlesnake Devereaux, president of the local chapter of the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club, leaned against the pool table. He was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s, with a grey beard and steady eyes. What diner? Silver Spur, out on Highway 3. Rattlesnake knew the place. He'd stopped there a dozen times over the years. He remembered Margaret, always had a smile, always kept the coffee coming. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Within an hour, the story had been shared across 3 motorcycle club networks spanning Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. The responses came fast. This is exactly the kind of thing we ride for. Let's show them what community means. I'm in. When and where? By evening, Rattlesnake's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He called a meeting at the clubhouse, a converted garage on the outskirts of town decorated with chapter banners and photographs from decades of rides. 30 riders showed up within an hour. Here's what I'm thinking, Rattlesnake said, standing before the group. We show up tomorrow morning, all of us. We order breakfast, we tip well, and we make it clear that what happened to Margaret was wrong. A rider named Sarah Sparkplug Chen raised her hand. She was a petite woman in her 40s who worked as a paralegal. Has anyone talked to Margaret? Does she even want this kind of attention? I got her number from Wrench, Rattlesnake said. Called her an hour ago. She was embarrassed at first, didn't want to cause trouble. But I explained we're not there to cause trouble, we're there to cause business. Show Chen that firing Margaret was bad for his bottom line. How many we talking? Asked a younger rider named Marcus. Rattlesnake checked his phone. Last count, I've got confirmations from chapters in Billings, Bozeman, Great Falls, Sheridan, Gillette, and Rapid City. We're looking at 300, maybe 350 riders. A low whistle went through the room. That's a lot of motorcycles, Sarah said. We need to coordinate this properly, make sure it stays peaceful, lawful. No blocking traffic, no confrontation. Agreed, Rattlesnake said. This isn't about intimidation, it's about solidarity. We arrive in formation, we're respectful, we eat, we leave. Anyone who can't handle that stays home. They spent the next 2 hours coordinating. They established a staging area at a truck stop 5 miles out. They designated road captains to maintain formation. They created a phone tree to communicate with arriving chapters. Sarah drafted a simple statement in case media showed up. We're here to support a member of our community who did the right thing. No further comment. By midnight, the plan was set. Riders across 4 states were checking their bikes, packing saddlebags, and setting alarms for 4 in the morning. Chapter 3. The Convoy. The sun hadn't yet crested the Beartooth Mountains when the first motorcycles began arriving at the truck stop. The air was cold and sharp, breath visible in the darkness. Riders wore leather jackets layered over thermal gear, most displaying their club patches and colors. Rattlesnake stood near the entrance with a clipboard, checking off chapters as they arrived. The parking lot filled steadily, rows of Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, and Customs, their chrome catching the sodium lights. The rumble of idling engines created a constant bass note that vibrated in the chest. By 6 o'clock, 347 motorcycles had assembled. Riders clustered in groups, sharing thermoses of coffee, discussing routes. There was a camaraderie in the pre-dawn darkness. Veterans and teachers, mechanics and nurses, retirees and students, united by a common code. Sarah moved through the crowd with a megaphone. Listen up. We're leaving in 15 minutes. Road captains have the route. We maintain staggered formation, keep proper spacing, obey all traffic laws. Anyone who breaks formation or causes trouble answers to their chapter president. This is a show of respect, not force. Understood? A chorus of agreement rippled through the assembly. At 6:15, Rattlesnake mounted his 1998 Harley Road King and raised his fist. Engines roared to life in sequence, a thunderous symphony that echoed off the surrounding buildings. He dropped his fist forward, and the convoy began to roll. They moved in precise formation down Highway 3, headlights cutting through the lingering darkness. The sound was immense, a rolling wave of mechanical thunder that announced itself miles before arrival. In the distance, the neon sign of the Silver Spur diner glowed against the lightening sky. Inside the diner, Raymond Chen was prepping for the breakfast shift, oblivious to what approached. He'd hired a replacement waitress the previous afternoon, a college student named Amy, who seemed nervous but willing. She was arranging silverware when the first rumble reached them. "What is that?" Amy asked, pausing. Raymond looked up from the register. The sound grew louder, deeper, impossible to ignore. He walked to the window. The highway had transformed into a river of motorcycles. They filled both lanes, extending back as far as he could see, moving in tight formation with military precision. The lead bikes began signaling, turning into the diner's parking lot. "Oh no," Raymond whispered. They kept coming. The parking lot filled in minutes. Motorcycles lining up in neat rows, filling every space, then extending onto the grass, then filling the adjacent lot. Riders dismounted in waves, removing helmets, stretching road-weary limbs. Rattlesnake was the first through the door. He was followed by Sarah, Wrench, Marcus, and a steady stream of leather-clad riders. The diner's capacity was 48 people. By the time the flow stopped, over 100 riders had packed inside, with another 200 waiting outside in the cold morning air. Raymond stood frozen behind the counter. Amy looked terrified. Rattlesnake approached calmly, hands visible, voice even. "Morning. We'd like breakfast, please. All of us." Raymond's mouth opened and closed. We can't. There's too many. Take your time, we're patient." Rattlesnake gestured to his crew. "Everyone, find a seat. Be polite. Wait your turn." The riders settled into booths and stools with remarkable courtesy. They didn't shout or threaten. They studied menus. They made small talk. The absurdity of the scene was striking. 300 bikers patiently waiting for breakfast at a 48-seat diner. Sarah approached the counter. "You might want to call in your other staff. This could take a while." Raymond's hands shook as he reached for his phone. He called his 2 prep cooks, his other waitress, even his wife. "Get here now. We have a situation." The situation, as it turned out, was remarkably orderly. As spaces opened inside, riders rotated in from outside. They ordered coffee, pancakes, eggs, bacon. They left generous tips, $10, $20, even $50 bills tucked under plates. No one complained about wait times. No one caused trouble. Chapter 4. Resolution. By 8 o'clock, news vans from 3 local stations had arrived. Reporters approached riders in the parking lot, cameras rolling. Rattlesnake had anticipated this. He stood near his motorcycle, giving the statement Sarah had prepared. "We're here to support Margaret Hayes, a woman who lost her job for showing compassion to a hungry child. Our community values people who do the right thing, even when it costs them personally. That's all I have to say." Other riders echoed similar sentiments when interviewed. No one threatened Raymond. No one called for boycotts or revenge. They simply stated facts and values. Inside, Raymond was drowning. The kitchen couldn't keep up. The single waitress was overwhelmed. Orders were backing up, coffee was running low, and the register couldn't process transactions fast enough. By 9 o'clock, he'd lost complete control of his business. His phone rang. It was his wife, Margaret's former colleague, who still had her number. "Ray, for God's sake, call Margaret, apologize. Hire her back. This is insane. I can't just... You're going to lose everything if you don't fix this. Swallow your pride." Raymond looked around his diner, at the sea of leather and patience, at his exhausted staff, at the line of motorcycles still extending down the highway. He dialed Margaret's number. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Margaret, it's Raymond." His voice was strained. I need to apologize. I was wrong. What you did, feeding that boy, it was the right thing. I let policy override humanity, and I'm sorry." Silence on the line. "I'm asking you to come back. Please, not just because of this situation, but because you're a good person and a valuable employee. I should have never let you go." More silence. Then, "You really mean that?" "I do. I've been thinking about it all night, even before this happened. I was wrong, Margaret. I'm asking for your forgiveness and your help. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Margaret walked through the door, the diner erupted in applause. Riders stood, clapping, some whistling. She froze, overwhelmed, tears streaming down her weathered face. Rattlesnake approached and shook her hand. "Thank you for being who you are," he said simply. Margaret tied on her apron, the same one Raymond had made her remove the day before, and got to work. With her experience and calm efficiency, the chaos began to organize. Orders flowed. Coffee stayed fresh. Within an hour, the operation had stabilized. Riders continued cycling through until almost noon. Every single one paid. Every single one tipped generously. By the time the last motorcycle rolled out of the parking lot, the Silver Spur had taken in more revenue in one morning than it typically made in a week. Raymond stood at the window, watching the final riders disappear down Highway 3. Margaret wiped down the counter beside him. "I learned something today," he said quietly. "What's that?" "That kindness isn't a business expense. It's an investment." He looked at her. "I'm giving you a raise, and from now on, any kid who comes in hungry gets fed. No questions asked. We'll call it the Margaret Hayes policy." She smiled, exhausted but genuine. "That sounds good, Ray." As the afternoon settled into its normal rhythm, a small figure appeared at the door. The boy from yesterday, the one who'd started everything, walked in slowly. His mother was with him this time, a tired-looking woman in scrubs who worked night shifts at the hospital. Margaret approached their booth. The boy looked up at her with enormous eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get you in trouble." She knelt beside the booth. "Sweetheart, you didn't get me in trouble. You reminded everyone what matters. You hungry?" He nodded. "Good, let's get you both some lunch." As she walked to the kitchen to place their order, Margaret glanced out the window. The highway was empty now. The thunder of engines faded to memory, but the message remained, written in tire marks and coffee cups and generous tips. A reminder that community means protecting those who protect others, and that sometimes the right thing to do is simply the human thing. The October sun broke through the clouds, warming the parking lot where 347 motorcycles had stood in solidarity. In the window, the neon sign of the Silver Spur Diner glowed steady and bright, a beacon for anyone who needed it, bikers, truckers, hungry kids, and waitresses who knew that feeding people was always more important than following rules.